Hi, Mike Hughes. This is a compositing tutorial I just finished up and I want to share it with you all. So let's jump to what I've done here. I got this Buddha statue, but I wanted to CGI this tractor in, all right, so it kind of has a nice look. So it looks something like this. So you can see the tractor looks very, very, very real, like it really should be there in the scene, okay? And actually that's because it should be in the scene. That was the real thing. The Buddha statue is what I put in there. Now I can see a few flaws actually as I see this final rendered, but let's just go from the start here, and we're going to do a lot of tools. It's going to be in Davinci Resolve. We will have to have a pro version because we will do some camera tracking, unless you can get some camera tracking data. But let's jump in. First off, let's take this footage. Now this is from a Black Magic camera. You can actually, this is the old school one, their 4K cinema camera. It's actually, I really love the thing. And so there's my base footage. So here's what I'm going to do. First off, I'm going to export this footage in something small and a little bit more workable for VFX work. Okay, I just generally find if I have a nice small 720, I can still do a lot of the camera tracking and things that I want to do. Okay, so anyways, let's go ahead, just call this intermediate. Let's put it at 720. Let's make an image sequence on this. All right. In fact, let's go ahead and put new folder in here. I call this tut file, and the codec. Let's do this now. Let's go to video. Let's do TIFF files. All right, and let's make them pretty small, just little 720. Okay, but the same aspect ratio. That's kind of important. The frame rate was shot at 24. That's good. All right, that's good. That's good. So let's go ahead and add this to render queue. And while this doesn't take long to render out. All right, so now I'm going to deliver. Let's go back to the media tab. All right, and let's go ahead and open up the Finder here, and let's go to the tutorial. Okay, here it is. All right, so that's probably not the best name, but let's go ahead and drop this in. So this is a TIFF image sequence, and essentially this is the exact same stuff. All right, it is just in a file which will work a little bit better for us. Okay, so can't even tell really the difference right here. Okay, all right, but I'll show you why that is important in a second. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Fusion tab. If you haven't done this before, don't be too afraid. So this is the media in, but the nice thing about the Fusion tab is the media in, the media out. It's almost like just a starting point, because you can really have any kind of media in and manipulate it to your heart's content, and then then you just got to pipe it out to the media out. Probably best if I show you what I'm going to do here. All right, so let's take a look here. Okay, so we got the media pool open here. So let's go ahead and just drop in those intermediate files. All right, so they're going to be a lot smaller and going to just load up a lot quicker. So now let's do our first thing. We're going to break this down. The first thing I want to do is motion track. So if we go through this file, so I'm going to click this, I'm going to hit 2. It's going to open it up on this viewer right here. I'm going to motion track this. All right, and actually it's going to be a camera tracker. So I hit shift space bar and camera, and you should find camera tracker. Now this will require the pro version, so you're gonna have to drop the $300 for Davinci Resolve, which honestly is well worth it. So first thing we want to do, let's go ahead and close the media pool. Let's open this up, give us a little bit of visibility here. Is let's turn preview on the track locations. All right. And first I got to do is I got to take the camera tracker and boom, I'm going to put it in here. Okay, so what you can do is, if you want to make these points a little bit brighter, go ahead and turn the gain down a bit. Okay, so you can see what's going on here. So if you haven't done the camera tracker, this is going to be a little bit of a tutorial. This is a soup to nuts tutorial, going over everything. So first off, the gutter size. Let's increase the gutter size because we don't need much stuff going on the edge. Okay, so because things are going to track off, and we do a lot of movement here. So in fact, even if we kick this to like 3, all right, that's fine. It's going to save a few track points. Now let's go ahead, increase this detection threshold up quite a bit and bring the minimum features together. So we're going to get a lot more features along through here, okay, which is going to get picked up. And from that, that's pretty much all we want to do. Let's go ahead. I don't even want to have that gutter that big. I'll have something like that. All right, let's go ahead and hit track. Now it's obviously going to take a little bit of time. Now while it's doing this, why don't I talk a little bit. So these are the track points, and essentially the next steps, what we want to do is get rid of some track points that simply didn't track very well. And we'll look at the error, track errors and what have you in the next little scene here. Then we're going to select, we're going to solve it for a camera, because essentially what this does here, it looks at these near pixels and these far pixels, and it thinks, wow, this guy's moving a lot faster than this guy, right? Obviously, it's parallax. Well, the computer figures that out and can tell, based on this movement, basically what the camera did. So our end result here is we're gonna figure out what the camera did, and then we can put in our own 3D objects on here. All right. Okay, I'll speed this up a little bit. Okay, now what we're going to do in this tab is, and again, we went from the tracking tab, and I set the lens to 24. Okay, now that we got these points, what I do is I set the focal length for the lens. That's fairly important because that really shows how wide, or if it's a zoom lens, that's going to affect this parallax calculation quite a bit. And of course the film gate, I happen to know I've been using Blackmagic 4K. So those are very important parameters. The rest of them really do not worry about. Next thing is to, see, now we got the track points, but now we have to solve them so we can figure out what the camera did. How did the camera actually move? So what we can do is we can select points that are bad and disregard them. So we're only feeding the calculation, the algorithm, probably the best points. So you can select the length. What this does is this is actually selecting, you can almost think of it selecting the bad points. The ones that turn yellow are the ones that are not meeting threshold. So the minimum track error, okay? So now this is selecting all these points that have this 0.12 track error. All right, the solve error is not going to matter because we haven't solved yet, so that's not going to do anything. So we select those tracks, which they already are. Now what you can do is you can delete them, but instead of deleting them, another thing you can do is bring their solve weight down to 0. All right, and click set. Now let's just do a reality check here. Let's just check out some of these points. I like to just kind of hover over. So that solve weight is at 0, and that track error was 0.123. Well, we set it for 0.121. All right, so that's going to be selected, and it's not going to be there. Now, because we have so many track points, I'm going to take these selected points, and I'm actually just going to delete them. All right, so they should be gone. All right, now let's just go ahead and run a solve. So we're going to do 2 iterations on this. If this takes too long, I'll fast forward. But basically, here's the process. We get rid of the ones that weren't tracked very well, and we're going to just disregard them. All right, we don't want to solve them. All right, and then what we want to do is figure out which ones didn't solve very well, and then we're going to get rid of those and run the solver again. All right, so I'll just let this think a little bit, and we'll come right back to it. Super, now we have our first solve. All right, now you can see there's a color codes through here, and if you want to bounce over to the far right, it's not that quite that far, to colors, all right, you can see what they mean. Okay, so this is for selection colors, preview new track, whatever. It can be a little bit helpful to trying to figure out what's going on here. So let me jump back here. Now let's use this selected track again. So now what we want to do is, we've solved it. Let's go ahead and find the solve error and bring the solve error down. And let's go, I think, now I'm not 100% sure on this, this is the pixel size, all right? So whether it's a pixel or not. I'm not 100% sure on that. But what I can see is I've selected 299, all right? So we still have quite a few. We have 2,000 track points. It's actually quite a bit. So let's just do reality check. Let's hover over here. Okay, and this says solve error 2.74. I can't move the mouse, but you can look right in the middle there. So these are bad solves, and I don't really care about, doesn't look like, let's just pan through. Yeah, we've got a nice green ones for the plane. Because I'll be honest with you, you got to look at these scenes and what do you really care about? This is what I care about a lot, this area in here, because that's where I want to put an object, all right? So here's what I'm going to do. So I've selected those, all right? So I selected the bad ones. I mean, this can be kind of confusing when you set this, because like, well, wait a minute, am I selecting on this side or this side? All right? So you can help to look over here and get a reality check, but let me just trust me, those are the bad ones. So let's go ahead and just flat out delete the bad ones. Get rid of them. They're gone, okay? So now we're down to 2,000 tracks, and they're going to be really actually quite good tracks, all right? So let's just go ahead and run the solve again. Now when you run it again, you don't have to worry about what you selected as far as the little point tracks in the point cloud, all right? They will all the ones that are in there will be solved, with the exception if you change the solve weight, all right? Instead of deleting them, you can actually change the solve weight to 0 and click set. All right, I'll let this finish up and we'll continue. Okay, that wasn't too bad considering that many tracks. Let's just take a peek here on the solve, all right? So what do we have here? We have track errors are pretty low, solve error average is about 1.2, so it's pretty good. It's a pretty good solve, all things considering. All right, so let's do this now. Let's go ahead and let's look at the 3D scene transform. Now this is what's kind of a cool thing with these nodes. With this camera tracker, go ahead and hit Shift Spacebar, and you can hit Point Cloud or just hit Merge 3D. I like to just hit Merge 3D. And I'm going to hit some of these tools. If you're completely new to Fusion, this is actually probably not a bad tutorial. So I hit number 2, and that should bring this point cloud up in the second, and here's the original footage over here, okay? So watch this now. I'm going to hold the command and drag back, and look at this point cloud, and look at this camera track, all right? So isn't that pretty cool? I mean, doesn't those points look pretty representative of what it picked up in the field? It's pretty awesome. Now if you drag back and forth, look at the camera. All right, this is actually really fun. You can get used to the controls in this 3D view. I hold Shift and Command, and I am on a trackpad. So let's see here. Let me get a good angle here. Hold Command, I'll zoom in. All right, now I am pretty cool stuff, isn't it? And it's almost like that camera projection is like it's moving, it's transversing, but it's like almost like it's looking at a 3D world. It's pretty slick. All right, so that's actually pretty fun. But now what we've got to do is we've got to export all this data and that camera. All right, and then we're going to be done with this node. So I clicked on this node over on the right. But before I export, this is actually a pretty important thing. Let's set the ground plane, all right, to be amongst, right along this grass out here. All right, doesn't that kind of make the most sense? So what we can do, even right in here, hold Command and drag forward. Why don't we select? Oh, I don't know. There's so many points here. I probably had too many points, but that's okay. Okay, I'm going to select all these points. I'm going to go down. Wow, they look pretty planar to me, don't they? That's actually pretty amazing. All right, so we're going to average all those out. And I'm going to come over here, again in this tab, click Unaligned, all right? Select the ground plane orientation, XY ground plane, and set from selection. Boom. Now, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but that little guy right there tilted. So the ground plane shifted. So in fact, I'll just go undo. Let's do it again. Okay, keep your eyes right here. I select it, douche. All right, so a little bit of change. Now this ground plane, when I realign it, is going to be selected right there. So let's go ahead and click aligned. Now you see the ground plane above here is parallel amongst all these averaged dots amongst right through here. Okay, pretty cool. But let's actually just make an origin point. All right, which probably where we want to put like our little statue. Okay, so let's look through this stuff here. What do I want to? I don't know, maybe somewhere in here. All right, so let's find any one of these. So let's deselect this. But we have just a ton of points. I probably have too many. You know what can help me out in this selection is let's go ahead and find the track lengths that have been there a long time. All right, so I don't know, let's just hit like 20 or something crazy like that. 23, I don't know. Okay, and select those tracks. Now, these are the tracks that are lower than that, below this number, which should be, I'm surprised it's not more than that. So what I can do is I can click invert, and notice how that selected all these. So, but all these are pretty ripe for the picking. And heck, why don't I just pick an origin which has a pretty small solve error. Right, and let's do this again. Let me click invert. Okay, let's just do a reality check. Okay, this has been around for 68. 100 markers, 100 frames, that is 108. I don't know. Solve errors 0.2. Okay, let's just pick that guy right there. Okay, that's going to be our origin. All right, that's our origin point. We could probably even find it in this point cloud. Looks like it's right over here. I'm gonna hazard a guess. Okay, doesn't really matter that much, but let's go back here. Go to unaligned. And go to the origin and set it from selection. All right, so now that origin is right on that point. All right, in 3D space, I go back to aligned, and let's see what we got here. All right, looks pretty cool. Looks really cool. So let's do this. Now let's export it. If we want to make some changes, we can actually update our previous export. But go ahead and keep your eyes down here in the node tree, and I'll show you what happens when I click export. Boom. Okay, we clicked export. We got all these nodes were made. Now, this is what's also kind of confusing. The camera tracker in this merge 3D is not really used anymore, all right, unless you got to make some changes. So what I like to do is keep things tidy, is select it. I'm going to hit Command G, and then I'm going to group it. All right, now I also set my, if you want, you can research how to set your hotkeys. I hit Option Shift L to, oh no, never mind, that's with nodes. With here, I go ahead and I change the label. All right, and let's see. So this is a group. Basically, you take all those nodes, and that's right, it's F2. Okay, so I'm just gonna put, you know, camera track. Okay, boom. All right, now right here, we have all our good stuff. So let's take this merge 3D and let's put this one in the second window. All right. Boom. Okay, it looks very much like the other one. All right, we have our origin point. That's cool. Let's just play a little bit for fun. Yeah, I love it. I love it. But what else do we have? We have our point cloud. Okay, the point cloud is all these dots, and then the ground plane. You know, a lot of times the ground plane, I'll just turn that off because it will kind of get in the way. Okay, it's not a bad idea to check on it to make sure it's coplanar with the points, but let's just go ahead and turn that off and get it away. Or I can just kind of unhook it. And then we have the output over here. This is actually what this camera sees. So we created the camera. This output is going to link to what this camera sees. So when we put in our 3D objects, that's what we're going to look at. All right, excellent. Okay, so now let's do the next phase on this, and let's throw in an object. So I happen to have, I forget where I downloaded it from. I put 3D objects, this little Buddha object, okay? So first things first, let's get the object itself in here. So I'm gonna hit Shift Command and, or excuse me, Shift Space Bar, And you know what? Actually, I forgot the tool, which is a good exercise. Now let's go up here. Let's go to Effects Library, Tools, 3D, and we need not a light, not texture. Yep, an image plane, FBX, a mesh, 3D. All right. Okay. Now, once you get this mesh, now this is where you will download an actual 3D object. And if you go to like Turbo Squid, here we go. So I downloaded this from the internet, all right? Generally, you want an object file. You can't, this is a Cinema 4D file, you can't import that. This, of course, came with the the normals and the color, which I'll show you how we get that in as well. All right, so here is our little mesh. Now, this is a little bit tricky, so if you haven't imported a 3D object, you're going to really like this because I'm going to go through all these steps for you. Now, the other thing we need is, let me just put this 3D object in there. So here's this Buddha statue, which is really means nothing right now, okay? Let me go to the media pool, and let's bring in these normals. Now, I'm just bringing this in as a image, all right, and it just treats it as media in. Fusion does. So this is basically going to get mapped and wrapped around this mesh, and the way it does it is there's another little tool, hit Shift Command. You're going to have one of these you know what, let's do this an easier way. Let's go up to Effects Library, Materials. See, there's these different, I honestly do not understand the nuances between these materials, but I know I've done Cook Torrents and Fong before, and these are things I've honestly just learned from other tutorials. So what I do is I'm going to click on here, all right, and I'm going to put it in this material. Now I'm going to hold down the Option key and let go. Oops, autosave. Let's try that again. Now I'm going to hang on the Option key and let go, and it's going to be the color material. All right, so let's just take a look. I'm going to hit 2, bring that up here. So this is what a raw material looks like. This puts it on a sphere. It's kind of funny. Now let's have the output of this material. I'm going to hold down Option to this object, and it's material input. Now let's take a look at this material now. Okay, now this is looking pretty cool, isn't it? All right, I like this particular statue. All right, really cool. Now I can also bring in the bump map, and let's see here. So let's do texture, and actually, what was this guy again? This was normals. Let's see what this guy is. I think this is a bump map right here. That looks like, again, I cannot claim to be an expert on all this, but the nice thing is you don't have to be either. Let's just try this to see what happens. So let's bring this in, and let's bring this over here. Actually, you know what? Let me put this on the left window. All right, as I bring this in, let's see what happens. I'm going to hold down Alt, Option Alt. It's not going to be material input. No, I know what I do. I'm sorry. I got to bring this in the Cook Torrents. This is going to be the roughness of the material. You know, that didn't really change much. Okay, I'll actually might research that and put that back in there on how we use this. Let me just try one more though. Color intensity index bump map. All right. Let's see if we have a height scale. And let's go ahead and zoom in here. See if we can tweak this statue at all. Okay, I can play with this a bit. I don't know if that's making that much of a change or not. All right, anyways, let's go ahead and let's take this 3D mesh and let's pipe it in to the merge. All right, so let's get the merge up right here. Let's get it where we can kind of orientate it. And by default, it's going to plop that thing right into the origin. Now let's go and put the output right there. And this little square is the output. I'm going to put it on the merge and pipe it in. All right. So as we can see, it got in there, but it got pretty big. All right, and it's flipped around. All right, and all the camera sees is just the back of the statue. So here's what we're going to do. Put in a transform node. Transform 3D. It's a 3D tool. And let's tidy this up a bit. First off, okay, and whenever you have any of this, think of like X, Y, Z, red, green, blue. So I got to rotate this about the Y-axis. So let's just rotate this 180. And let's scale it down. It's nice to do this in a transform node. Okay, cool. That looks not good, but it will look good. So now what we want to do, let's zoom in here a little bit. Let's go ahead and make this thing a little bit easier to work with and change the center axis right down in the bottom. So you have to go down to the pivot. Again, I'm selected on the transform. And in the Y direction, let's bring that down. Like that. All right. Something like that. So I'm holding command and scrolling in. It's a mess. Okay, that's kind of below the plane a little bit. Let's just raise that up a little bit. All right. So now whenever we adjust that transform, all right, we're going to deal right at this base here, okay? And actually for fun, why don't we rotate it about the Y-axis? Which way do we want? We can do this later too. Let's go like this so we can see a little more parallax, all right? Good, okay, now let's play this and see how it plays back if it sticks. So I want to look right on the base here next to these piece of the snow and such to see if there's any slippage or moves. And it's looks like it's right attached with the ground plane. All right, I'm not seeing any what's called slippage. But obviously it looks heinously fake, right? So that's the next part of this big tutorial, which we're going to knock out. All right. Cool. All right. That looks pretty good. Okay then. So now the question is, what do we do with that image? All right. So what we want to do, and here's the thing too. Now a lot of times what you see in a lot of tutorials is like, well, we're going to take this output and merge it, and then we're going to put in, a color corrector tab, and then we're just going to do a little color correction, and we'll be done. All right, it's going to be great. Problem is this little color corrector tab. If you're to compare this color corrector tab to this color corrector tab of Davinci, what is orders of magnitude more powerful, right? It's this guy by far and away. Okay, look at, we got curves, we've got everything. We got all the effects with the grain and taking out the grain. It's there's no comparison. When Fusion first got lodged in, I thought this is a direction everyone would go right away, is compositing. So let me show you a way to composite, I think, a little bit more effectively than I guess what seems to be the mainstream way right now. Okay, so anyways, here we are. Okay, so first off, what I've got to do is export or actually pipe this image out of this not comp, but out of this clip. So let's go ahead and find the media out. So the media out is going to be what we have in this tracker right here. All right, let's go ahead and get rid of that color corrector. Now I don't want all this junk in the background, okay? And if you recall, this background is a 720 image, not the full 4K. So what we're going to do is simply, right now this camera has that media piped into it by default. Let's just get rid of it. And what we have is just the image moving in space. All right. Now, we're going to come back to this and change the motion blur. All right, let's just not talk about that right now, if you're thinking that, all right? Right now, let's just go back to the Edit tab. All right. We have this image. Let's go ahead and pull this up one layer, and let's go back to our media pool, and let's put in the original image. All right, this is a nice big 4K image, and let's drop it underneath. All right, so what do we have? We have a composite, which looks absolutely horrible. All right, okay, but that's okay. We're gonna fix that. We are going to fix that. Now, what you could do if the playback's a little bit slow, I could come over here and put in that intermediate footage underneath here. Okay, oops, that's a little bit weird. Oh, shoot, Control do that. Let's put in this intermediate footage. Okay, let's see if that. Well, I think one of the reasons that playback is slow is because you can see this is actually rendering right now. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all this data that we have in this clip. All right. Remember, this is the fusion clip. All right. This is the clip that has the little stars right there. Actually, is just piping out that image. And let's go ahead and right-click that, and let's go ahead and render cache fusion output. Let's turn it on and let that crank away. Now, I think I did turn that on globally, and it's doing that anyways. But let's just go ahead and wait a little bit, and let's have this render out. All right, so we can play with it a little bit more. Okay, super. So that rendered out. It's a nice little blue line here, so it's going to play back pretty nice. Okay. Now, I'm just going to say right now, you can notice there's not very good motion blur on this guy, amongst a whole host of other issues, but we're going to fix that very methodically. I also just played around with using those TIFF image files and using the RAW file, which is a 422 ProRes, and it looks like playback for both is good for my particular SD card and graphics card and such. Okay. So, okay, now let's select this right here, this guy, and let's go into the color tab. All right, now what we want to do here is let's just take some methodical steps on how we can get this looking like orders of magnitude more realistic. First off, we've got to pull up our scopes, our trusty scopes, all right, and take a pretty good look at this. Second thing I want to do is, with my qualifier on, I'm going to right click in here. Don't select anything yet, like I think I just did on accident, but I'm going to right click, come on, right click, and show picker RBG value. This is a huge tool. I think I learned this from Patrick Imhoffer, but it's an amazing tool. I think I selected before. Let me just let me do that real quick. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is, with this picker selected, is let's just do some sampling of what is black and what is the brightest colors, and let's try to get this guy. Now, mind you, I am on this clip. I'm not editing this bottom one. In fact, if I turn the bottom one off, okay, we're not even dealing with that. I'm just using that for a reference, all right? Because there is an alpha channel. There's basically, it pipes out an alpha channel from that fusion, which is really nice. So the background, we don't have to key or do any of that kind of nonsense and filth. So right here, if I put my cursor down here, I got 10, 19, 23, all right? So wouldn't it make sense to have the darkest spot here about the same? Right now, it's pushed a little bit red, all right? So let's just go ahead, and I could use my control surface I have here, but I think I'm actually going to use the bars. Let's go down the lift, and let's try to get back. Let's just kind of scroll around here a bit, find some black stuff. All right, 7, 18. Let's just go 8, 8, 8. That was a little bit more blue. I like this color black here. 14, 20, 23. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go ahead and take a look right here. And first off, let's raise the blues a bit. And this is going to be a little iterative process here. Okay, that's 16. Let's lower the reds. All right. Let's raise the greens just a little bit. Just slightly. All right, 8, 19, 13. Let's raise those blues a little bit too. Now this is not the final color correction. We will do that at the very end. Okay, and red is a little bit low on that. What was this guy again? 14, 20, 25. Another way I can do this is raise this up a little bit, basically lowering the contrast. 12, 19, blue. Let's just lower those blues a little bit. Okay, so now that's kind of a start. What about the brightest? So the brightest in here, we have, okay, 165, 185, 204. It's pretty blue hinted. So even though I got to remember, I set the temperature to 6,500, but still early morning, it is very, very pushed to the blue. I don't really have anything white on here, so to speak, but obviously it's pretty red. So let's just push the blues up a bit. Okay. The greens a bit. And let's just dip these reds just a little bit. I get the ratio set. Okay, so now, again, let's just pick something kind of white here. And I'm not stuck with this frame either. Let's jaunt around here a little bit. Let's look at this. That's going to put me off there. All right, 125. It's almost like a skin tone color, isn't it? Like 158. Okay, so let's lower those green just a little bit. This isn't white. This is definitely going to be a bit red because that's what the statute is. Okay. Okay, fair enough. Now, one thing you maybe notice on here is even if we get the color about right in the ranges, all right, obviously we got blur issues, motion blur issues, and the big one, shadows, all right? So let's think about what we want to do to get a nice shadow underneath here. So let's just go back to the Edit tab, and why don't we jump into the Fusion, all right? And let's go ahead and put in a shadow. Now there's two ways of doing this. I can actually put in a light, all right, and make the shadow. It's a little bit more intensive, and since we don't really have a moving light, I'm just actually going to throw the shadow underneath here, all right? I might do two of them, I think. So let me zoom out here a little bit so I can see what we're going to do. And heck, for the heck of it, why don't I pipe in that background again? Okay, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and put in a background. And let's get this background. Let's give a little bit of blue to it, but it's obviously going to be pretty dark and be saturated. All right, now this background, I'm going to play it on number 2. That's all it is. All right, it's a nice big background. Let's go ahead and let's just start off with drawing a mask on this background. I'm going to leave a generous amount of space. I don't need to do too many points there. That's probably too many points. And let's go in with this. I'm on this mask now. Let's soften that edge. All right. And that's all I have to do right now. Now let's take this background and we got to make it in 3D space. So it's an image plane. All right. This basically takes this guy and makes this little image plane, which you can barely see there. So let's take the image plane and let's do a transform. Now you could do that within the image plane, but I think it makes a lot more sense to just have that image plane set and then transform it. So let's go ahead and start by scaling it up. And I don't know, let's just go big, 20. Oops, it's not in there, it's gonna be huge. Okay, now that's way too big, which is fine. Let's make it smaller. And I know I want it flat, so let's rotate about the x-axis. All right, let's go x. Let's go -90. So I got that z handle sticking up there. All right, now that's right at the origin. So let's go ahead and pipe this guy into. Now when you have a merge 3D, you can merge in as many 3D objects as you want. All right, so let's take a peek here. Let's see what we have. All right, so basically I'm putting in a shadow. So let's go ahead and take this transform. Might get a little busy in there, so I know the Z, positive Z is going to bring it forward a little bit. All right, so something like that. All right. So now let's look at the output. This is the key right here. And we can see, okay, there is a shadow. Now let's go ahead and, if we turn it off, see it looks very, 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 it looks just stupid, right? Like it's just like a, it doesn't look right at all if you don't have a shadow. All right, there it is. So now let's take this guy and let's edit it. We can edit it right here, actually. Actually, there's a few ways we can edit this. I won't edit here too much. What I'm going to do is go into the transform further down the pipeline and start scaling it. So let's unlock the XYZ scale. Let's bring this guy up so it's comparable. So if you remember in 3D space, like this is the X direction, Y and Z, okay? So let's go ahead and select the transform. Why don't we scale that? And actually we rotate it in the Y, but scale it. A little narrow it up there. In fact, you know what, let's kind of zoom in here. And if these ranges don't work for you, just manually type in a range. 57 is crazy. All right, and I'll stretch out a bit. All right. Good. Okay. So that looks better. All right. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this whole thing, copy it, and I'm going to do a second shadow. All right. But I'm going to go up this polygon, and I'm just going to take the edge down a little bit. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hit it and hit one, put it in one. I want something a little bit tighter right around the edge and something a little bit broader. Because if you look at this image, you can kind of see right underneath these tines, these forks. If it, see if we can get it up there. See, there's a little bit of a shadow. All right. So you can kind of see there's some light out there, but not a whole lot. So let's go ahead and pipe that guy in. Let's take a peek. All right. So that's a little bit tighter now. Let's play with this transform to move it around. I'm going to bring it in the X direction to the right a little bit. Oh, it looks a little weird. Yeah, it looks very weird. What's going on there? Let me bring it up. I wonder if it's overlapping with... Let me turn the other shadow off. So we just get this guy, okay? You know what, let's do this another way. Let's take this, merge 3D, put it in the first one, and let's go like this. Now, let's look at this transform. Let's turn it off and on. Okay, that's what we're looking at here. So let's shrink this guy up. I'm basically looking right down on top. Honestly, let's rotate it a little bit. Let's rotate it about the Y-axis. And let's bring it forward. Okay. It's funny, it looks a lot more forward right here. All right, let's go ahead. What if we just turn it off? What happens? Okay, anyways, you get the idea on this. Let's bring a little bit more forward. Okay. Okay, let's live with that, and let's bring the other one in. Okay, so I want a little bit more general of a shadow, and I want a very, one that's kind of pretty dark right underneath it. Let me stretch that a little bit more. Okay, so one thing that might be hurting me a little bit is the render. change this to a software render, but okay, I like that. Now let's go back to the edit tab. So we made our changes there. Now we got to re-render this. So let's let that re-render. Actually, no, let's do this actually. Let's have the shadow and the statue on 2 different layers. All right, so we can act on them independently. So let's do this. Let's hit copy. And I'm going to hit paste. Okay, so right now this can be kind of frustrating too. Right now it's trying to hammer out and render, and sometimes it can really slow things down. So let's just go ahead and turn that render off. So render cache fusion output, let's put it off. And same thing right here, render cache fusion output, turn it off. So let's do this. Now I'm bringing sound files in here, which I don't need, but let's make this guy, this top one, this is actually going to be the statue, and this one's going to be the shadow. So let's go into this one, and basically let's just get rid of the shadows in this merge. I'm just going to unhook them. All right. In fact, to tidy things up, let's go ahead and I'm going to select these. I'm going to hit Control or Command G, and then I'm going to hit Function key 2. And I'm going to put shadows. All right. See how nice and tidy that makes? A lot of people get intimidated with all the nodes in the structure, but you can actually make it pretty tidy. It helps you when you come back to it and you want to know what a whole group of nodes is doing. So now let's get here and let's just do. Oh, that's weird. Which one was that on there? Let's do this one, and let's hit Fusion. Okay, that's a good thing to note, that you're in the right Fusion tab. That one brought me to the other. So now for this one, I want to get rid of, remember we did all this stuff, all these nodes to get that guy in there. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so now we just have that. Now actually I forgot, let's go ahead and get rid of that. So the only thing we are piping in there is that shadow. All right. So while I'm here too, remember it looked a little bit funny, a little bit hazy before. What might be going on here is there's the wrong render. Kind of select there, hit Command F to get a full size. If you right click in a viewer, all right, you can actually take that back. I am on the output render here. Instead of OpenGL, you can turn this to a software render. And that might give you the results you want if things get a little bit squirrely, okay? But I do think it takes a bit more resources. So anyways, okay, so that is this layer right here, and I could rename that shadow. And this layer, I'm just going to pull it aside for right now, all right, is just going to be, I don't want that background. So, because the background is back on this layer down here. So let's go into Fusion and let's disconnect that input media to the camera. So the camera is not acting like a projector in this merge field. Chop out to edit. And, okay, so here is our layers. Is that a think? Great. Okay, you remember it was kind of blue and weird looking, that background? Well, now we're actually looking right here. If I turn this off, then boom, I just get the shadow. If I turn that off, then boom, I just get just the raw video. So now let's do this. To make things work a little bit easier, let's render these out, all right, and then we'll do our color grade. So I'm going to right click, render fusion output on, and that should crank away. And again, right here, I'm going to right click, render fusion output on. Okay, so let's take a little break while these both render out. Okay, I know where I'm going to go with this, so I thought I'd jump in. While this is actually rendering out, let's go. I cut and paste the little Buddha, and it's right up here. Let's go ahead and turn off that render output for right now, and let's jump in there. So this is just a copy of that little Buddha thing we have above. Let's put in some motion blur, all right? Because let's do this. If we take a look at this clip, notice how there's definitely some motion blur. Now, unfortunately, I didn't film it with any steady shots, so it's kind of hard to get the sense of a steady shot versus the blur. But you can just see at 180 degree shutter angle, because at 24 frames per second, 180 degree shutter angle, right? That is 1/48. That's one half, right? 180 degrees. It's going to be one half of that, which is 1/48. All right. So when this moves around, how does this going to move and have that same sort of look as opposed to jumping frame to frame? All right, like a very, very fast shutter speed. So you can do in Fusion. If you're from After Effects and things like that, it can be a little bit confusing because you a lot of times you set in the camera, the shutter speed. All right, so you can set that motion blur. Fusion's a little bit different. What you have to do is you have to go with the output, because remember, whenever you have a 3D scene, you have an output. All right, so just to make sure we're all clear on that, if you go to render, okay, render 3D, remember we created this render automatically, right? But all we're doing, this is the same thing right here. All right, so that's an output render. Now this output render, if you go into its properties, you want to enable lighting and shadows. We didn't use lighting and shadows. We're going to do all that actually within the color grading. But if you go all the way to the end here, all right, on this tab, then we click motion blur. All right, so let's go ahead and let's zoom in here a little bit. In fact, let's just put this as 1. So if we have motion blur, it looks something like this. First off, let's jack this quality up. And the shutter angle, see, it doesn't really know the distance from the camera, so you can actually change it. Now, if you're not seeing the motion blur here, what you want to do is right click and then make sure you have motion blur on. Okay, so within there's a button in regular Fusion, but you just have to right click in this area to get it there. Let's just crank this up a little bit. So the shutter angle means that's going to be slower shutter speed. All right, means basically there's going to be more blur. As far as this bias, these things are not very effective, and I can do another tutorial to show that. But essentially what we're doing is, let's go ahead and zoom in here. Command and then the mouse. So you can see that nice blurry look. Let me turn it off I don't want to turn it on. Let me turn off the motion blur. Okay, clear as a bell. Not good. Blurry, good. All right. So that's probably going to work. So let's go back in the edit tab right here. Okay, this guy's cranking away. Tell you what, we will compare both of these. I'm going to go ahead and right click on this and render that Fusion output, and then let's come back and take a look, and we'll really show the difference here. Okay, now it's done rendering, and if you need to research up a little bit more on playback speed and such, if you go to playback, there's proxy mode and a few things here, creating optimized media, but also the Fusion cache. So Daria Goat's Eye View has some pretty good tutorials on that if you want to search that. But anyways, here's what you can see. If you just look right here, this flying little Buddha. All right, we got some motion blur in here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hit full screen on the viewer, and you can kind of see there's a little bit of blur, which is desirable. It's what we want. All right, now let's look at this one, and to compare it out, let me go ahead and turn off these clips just so it's less confusing. All right, let me go full screen again. And, oh, I'm sorry, this is, I already switched them around. This has the motion blur. All right, see how it's a little bit of a blur in there. All right, kind of, you can probably, hopefully that picks it up. And if you look right here, it's just too crisp the whole way through. Okay, it's a huge thing as far as selling the effect. So I've got this one with motion blur. There's a lot of it right there because it's obviously moving pretty quick. All right. So now let's go ahead. I'm going to turn these on. Let's go into the color tab. And I did a general. Now, one thing to note too, if I go down to this bottom, this base clip, I could have graded it. If I turn on my scopes, you can see it's still a very flat image. All right, it's a log image, right from the camera. But I honestly like to just kind of match the underlying image first. You could really go either way on this. All right, I could have done a grade here and then match that, but it's just as easy just to match it to the base image and then change the whole thing thereafter. Make the whole thing look good. Alrighty then, so I am on the correct node here. Let's kind of get a good hero shot around here, something like that. I'm gonna open the scopes up again. Okay, so obviously I got to make a few more changes here. Let's go ahead and put another node in. I hit Alt S to put another node, and I got my keyboard mapped to Option Shift L, and let's call this saturation. So let's just simply tune down the saturation. If I just turn off the background stuff, I can look down right here, and it's not very saturated to begin with. I'm using my little mini micro control surface. And let me turn these back on for reference because I'm going to do this by eye. Yeah, I think we can tame that a bit. All right. So let's do another look and let's change contrast. So I think this is too much contrast. So let's hit Option S for another one. I'm going to hit Option Shift L for contrast. And I want to lower that contrast. But here's the cool thing with Davinci. Let's go ahead and turn everything off here. Let's put the contrast like right in the middle. You kind of see where we have our darks to our brights. I'm going to take the pivot and bring it down kind of right in the middle here. Okay, probably about like 300. All right, in this case it'll be about 33%. And then let's dial that contrast down. All right, so you can see in the scopes here, like on the waveform, we're kind of bringing it in a little bit. We're also raising the blacks. So let's go ahead and put this with everything else. So now here's a little thing I'll do is you got to look at the internal node. I could put another correcting node, but I'll just do it within this node. I'm actually going to take my wheels on my control surface. Let's just change this to the primary, and let's lower these blacks. So I'm actually lowering this lift right here. All right. So we kind of get back down. All right, so again, this is kind of taken away. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep that contrast high like that. I'm going to just go to the offset and bring the whole thing down. All right, the offset is like the elevator. It brings, in fact, I'll just show you real quick in case you're not familiar. So this is the waveform, all right? So if I do the offset, the whole thing is going to drop, all right? And that should behave after the contrast adjustment. Out of abundance of caution, I could put another node there. All right. If it was like shifting with the pivot, I would know that that operation takes place after the contrast. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn on the bottom layers. And let's just, when we're done each layer, let's just hit Command D, Control Command D, and see what we did. Okay, I think we made a lot of ground there, didn't we? We darkened it a bit, brought the whole thing down, and we made it a little bit more contrasty. All right, that's not bad. Cool. All right. So what is the next thing we can attack on here? Well, what about the shadows? Okay. We already did the shadows, but are they all desaturated to black? Well, some of these changes I'm going to do globally. Okay, like grain. Okay. What if I put some grain in there? Well, let me put the grain over the whole thing, which I'll do after I'm done doing this right now. All right, now the whole thing does still look a little bit bright, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put just another node after the whole thing, and I think I want to do the next adjustment with levels. All right, so let's just go here, or curves rather. Let's use curves, and let's come into Davinci, and let's just go to a basic curve. All right, so I'm just going to do this by eye and also use the picker value a little bit. I see this is still kind of bright, all right, compared to the surrounding. Like this grass is, 72, 89, 96, and this is a little bit higher. So let's try this. Let's just go ahead and play darkening this whole thing. In fact, let me get this guy up here a little bit. So this is darkening, and let's try, I don't want to lift it, I don't want to drop it anymore. I think the blacks we already got figured out and set. I might bring it up just a little bit there. Okay, now I can play with the gamma in a little bit here, raise it. Could even try to play desaturate. I don't think I'll play with too much on that. Okay. One thing is that this has a dark shadow underneath it, which is unfortunate because that's actually in that map, that wrapped image map to it. Okay, so I think that helps a little bit. Again, I hit Command D to turn that off. Okay, we're starting to get a little bit darker there. Now, before I go further, why don't I jump down here? I got to make sure I'm in the right node here because this is the shadow. All right. So that shadow isn't really working for me right now. It's a little bit too blue. I remember I put some blue on it. But now what I want to do is pretty much darken that up. So I'll just, well, since I'm in curves, I'll just stick here. And let's take a little bit, thin there, a little bit of blue out of it actually. So I'm just taking the lift, bringing it in that direction. The separate part isn't going to matter much since it's all dark, but I think something like that, all right? Nothing too major. So it kind of goes, yeah, from that, a little bit darker or something like that, all right? I could probably go back in there and put a little bit more feather on there and change it. Another thing I can do as well is just make this a little bit more transparent. So to make it a little bit more transparent, first off, let me isolate this layer. You can see that's yeah, it doesn't show that really well actually. But let's go and right click and let's just add alpha output, okay? And let's just pipe this guy out straight from there. All right. Actually, I don't want to. Doesn't like that. That doesn't look good at all. Okay, let's not do that. Let's not do the alpha output. Let's do it this way. Let's just go into edit itself and pick this layer and go to inspector. Turn that off for now. And let's just change its opacity and bring it down. Just a smidgen, not much. You don't have to do just a little bit like that. Okay, I don't like how it flares out right there, but I think I can live with that. Okay, let's go back to the color tab. Now I am back on the Buddha node. All right here. I'm trying to think of what other change I wanted to sell us. Now I could put a blur in. Let's just do this. Now blur is going to increase things up, but I don't know if I need to because I did get the motion blur, but let's just play with it. So if you just do, say, box blur or Gaussian blur, all right, that looks pretty good. All right, let's take this down. And let's kind of zoom in here. No, that's too much blur, clearly. Yeah, I don't think we need it. I think our motion blur did the trick. Just toggle this on and off. Nope, I don't think we need the blur. All right, I've done this before and I actually used motion blur. Excuse me, I used the blur to kind of help it, and I think we nailed it with our motion blur upstream in the workflow. Okay, so let's do this now. this is not a destructive edit, so I can always come back and change this as I see fit. All right, but let's go ahead and just change everything globally now. So the best way to do that, I could come up here and go from clip and just change timeline, and that changes everything in the timeline. But that's not, I don't really like doing that. It actually, I lose a little bit of flexibility, and sometimes you can forget where those edits are. So let's go back to edit. Let's pick all three of these things, okay? And honestly, you know what, let's just do this. Let's turn off, I don't need that stupid sound. Let's just get rid of these sound clips. Delete those, okay? This is our little scratch stuff over here. Don't really need those. So let's pick these. Let's right click. Let me get actually in, yeah, I'll get in there, that's fine. I'm gonna right click and let's make a new compound clip. Let's call this tutorial Buddha. I think I spelled that right. And that is going to make a compound clip. So basically all three of these are going to be jammed into one clip. All right, this guy right here. And I can actually treat this guy now like one single clip. It's really, really handy to do. All right. If I want to get into the clip, I just right click. See, I'll right click and I'll click open in timeline. And there it is. So now the other thing I should note too is notice how I have these nice little tabs up here, which are really, really, really convenient. Well, to get those, if you click right in here, you can actually come down and change those options to get those tabs or not. Okay, it's pretty, actually I think it's up here. Yeah, boom. Okay, click this button right here and you should get those tabs. Okay, super. So now I have now I'm going to edit all of these just collectively together. So let's go into the color tab and you'll see I should have a nice fresh node tree. So now I definitely open up my scopes. I hit Command Shift W and let's just start our base edits. So everything looks pretty good here, pretty even. So now I'm gonna bring down the blacks. Here, I'll just actually, I won't use my control panel. I'll actually do it right here so you can see. Oh, come on there, guy. So I'm going to bring down, just touch. What I'm going to do, I'm going to look at the waveform. And honestly, I don't like looking at this mixed one. I got to see it when it's just the Luma, so I know what the final output is of all the RGB together. All right. So I just want to kind of kiss the blacks down there because I think we do have some true things that are black. I'm gonna lift the highlights, lift the gain. So let's go ahead and lift this up. Actually, it's getting really draggy. I think the screen capture is starting to wear on this a little bit. So let's jump back into, as you can see, I want this lower part a little bit darker. Okay, so I just want to apply basically just a quick little grade on the lower part. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hit Option S for a new node, and let's put in one of these masks, and let's just put a simple little square in here. Okay, so I want to kind of feather this out pretty generously. All right. So I'm just hitting that lower part. So something like that. Now, as we know, this thing moves around. This little Buddha moves around. And I could go all the way back upstream and make the edit within Fusion, but I think I can do it right here pretty easy. But I want to track this. So with this selected, all right, this track selected and everything, let's go into the tracking tab and let's just go ahead and forward track. So this is actually going to pick little I don't know what you call them, little areas of contrast, and it is going to change the pan, tilt, zoom. And I disabled 3D because I don't really need that. In fact, I really only need about pan and tilt on this, but let's go ahead and let this finish. All right, we're just finishing up this little track. All right, so now you may be thinking right now, well, gosh, why would you track that moving thing? Why don't you just go back in Fusion and just light it up right when it's in a static, you know? You can, but just kind of heed some advice from like Grayscale, Gorilla, and some other compositors. Do what you need to do in the 3D stuff, and then get out as quick as you can. All right, the quicker you can get out, like you really want to do the 3D fusion stuff with the parallax and things like that. So anywho, let's turn this off. All right, and let's take a peek what we got here. So now let's go. I won't use my surface. I'll just come here. Let's go ahead and darken this up. So we're just this little piece right here. Let me get rid of that. Let me just go somewhere else. Okay. So let's actually let me go to right here. So let's go ahead and like this. I'm not gonna go over and actually this might be kind of weird. Why don't I raise the shadows but drop the lift a little bit? All right. So actually no, I take that back. I want to actually lower the shadows. Okay, let's bring those shadows down a little bit. I can kind of see what's going on over here. And actually, let me go back and raise that lift, just so it's not too dark. Kind of in that area there. Okay. You got to remember though, we're gonna downstream. We're gonna fix the whole image. All right, something like that. So I'm gonna hit Command E, turn it off, on. Okay, it's pretty subtle, but effective, right? Clear to see. In fact, sometimes what I like to do is let's just go a little bit overboard. Let's drop the shadows even more. Down here, let's drop the shadows. All right. And let's look at the look. It's a little bit too aggressive, right? So if it's too aggressive, then you can just come back. Let's get rid of that for a second. And let's go ahead and just, if you don't like anything about any node, just go and adjust how much you want to weigh it in, all right? I kind of like this because you can just kind of, instead of being Boolean, you can take all your corrections and just sort of feather it a little less, a little more treatment there. Yeah, I kind of like that. It's a little bit dark for the whole scene. In fact, I might just add another node. Let me just correct that. Now when I look at this, let's do a curves. Let's lift it a little bit, the darks, and let's just kind of decontrast it a little bit. Something like that. And one thing I should note, which I would normally do, is have a green channel up here and just look at it through the green channel. But I don't know how to do that with Davinci at this time. I do that. It's something you can definitely do in After Effects and things like that. Okay, and again, let's look at this guy. Yeah, it's a little bit decontrasted a little bit there. I'll play with the gamma a little bit here. Let me lift that up just a little bit. Okay, good enough. I'm going to play with this, but I'm trying to play with it fairly methodically. Alright, so let's go back to the tutorial where I have all three of those clips in together combined. Let's go back to color. Alright, so now this is just my general curve. So I just call it general. And let's go and add another node, Option S. Let's put the saturation on this one. Alright, so again, Option Shift L, let's call it saturation. And I'm going to do this little trick, just kind of boost them all, kind of get a maximum saturation. And that's a little bit oversaturated there, but I'm going to come in and then dekey it a bit, kind of to taste. And let's go ahead and take a peek. And we're pretty green. Let's go ahead, bring that down. Okay, something like that. That's a little bit. Cool. Now, let's go ahead and desaturate all these blacks. Hit Alt S. And usually I do this more towards the end, okay? But I can put intermediate nodes later. Let's go ahead and call this desat blacks. And what we want to do is come into the curves here and go to custom. And if you don't know what saturation, something versus something, if that's confusing, like the X versus Y, learn this from Robbie. I forgot his last name. Just went to his deal. But think of hue controls loom. Okay, luminescence controls saturation, all right? Luminescence controls saturation. So let's take the luminescence, the darks on the x-axis, and watch what happens. I'm going to bring these down. All right, see I got very desaturated all the way around, right? So I'm going to bring this down like that. Now all I'm doing is desaturating the blacks. I just want to touch these blacks so everything comes to black. Now sometimes, let me turn this node on and off, Command D. You can't really, you can tell a little bit, like in this area here, all right? Okay, you can tell a little bit, but let's go ahead and put the scopes up and take a peek and everything down in this area and here. Yep, see those, I'm lifting those reds quite a bit actually. Okay, and that looks a little bit, I think it's getting a little bit chunky through there or something, so let's just tweak this curve a little bit so it's a little more friendly. So I get those blacks, but nothing's too, excuse me, nothing's too out of whack. All right, good. So what else can I do with this? Well, you know, sometimes it's nice just to put a vignette in general. It kind of blends it, brings everything together. So we turn off the scopes for a bit. The screen thing's getting screwed up a bit, the screen capture. So let's put a nice big circle in here. Let's put a ton of feather. Let's make it about 69. Bring it up pretty big. Let's go ahead and see what we're looking at. And let's invert it. Something like that. Now if that goes away and you still want to see it, just click another tool and then click back. Okay. So let's really, and maybe I don't want it quite that soft. Something like that. Okay. All right. Okay, so now, let me get out of there. Let's just go ahead and use the dials here and let's kind of bring this stuff down a little bit all around. Let's bring the highlights down, midtones, the blacks a little, not too much in the black. Just a very vignette. If you do a vignette right, you shouldn't really even know it's there until you turn it off, okay? It can be pretty drastic, but it kind of sells it. See how it all kind of just blends together, all right? And there's that gradient. It's just another thing to sell it, definitely. Cool. All right, so next thing after vignette, let's put in the grain. So I'm going to save it because sometimes this can go bad. But let's go into our Open VFX and type in grain. All right, film grain, and dump that on. Okay, let's go ahead and let's tidy this node graph up a little bit. Let's label it grain, and I don't know. Let's try like. Let's look at these. Let's just look at the grain only and see something which is kind of suitable for this. This is kind of a dark image. I think kind of a chunky, something like that would look pretty cool. All right. Don't crash on me. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look here. Now, shocking how much you don't notice it. All right, but once it gets bigger, essentially once you get really dialed in, as it plays, after it renders, you'll really get a sense of it just works pretty well. All right, so where it just tends to blend, kind of wash everything in together. All right, still a little bit saturated for me. I might go in there and desaturate it just a little bit, but these are kind of the main steps to kind of put that overhaul. All right, let me look at this one more time. See if there's anything more I'd want to do, like mid-range contrast. Heck, let me just play with it. Let me just go upstream. Let me turn off the grain just because it can screw things up a bit. Let me go after saturation here. Alt S, new one. Let's add a little punch. It's called mid-range contrast. Okay. It's great when you want to make dudes look older and girls look younger. Let's go in here. Where's my mid-range contrast? Right here. So we get a little bit of, see if I want a little punch or not. Well, this kind of softens it up, the whole thing, quite a bit to lower it. I actually might lower that mid-range contrast because kind of all this detail in the grass is not really what I'm too interested in. Let's just kind of lower it, sort of homogenize the whole thing in together. Very good. While I'm here too, let me just put another node if I want to play with any tint or contrast and such, all right? So let's just call this, I don't know, let's just call it tint and temp. Because I look right down here, I think, would I want to shift this whole thing, almost give it sort of a globalized look. It's kind of nice to do that just with temperatures. It's kind of cool right now. See if I want to cool it down a bit, or maybe just warm the whole thing up a bit. Well, if I warm the whole thing up just a little bit, this kind of gets, I have to go back and I think do a little bit of an underline. Well, the color is what it is too. But I don't think I wouldn't mind doing a little bit. Let's do the tint. I go from it's very magenta to very green. I might shift it. Could just be, you can kind of see, like, if you make the whole thing, if you have a look to it, like make the whole thing look green, that kind of really sells it, doesn't it? But that might compromise your image a little bit there. I might pull it just a little bit green. All right. Now, honestly, let me go back and go back in the timeline. Color correct right in here. And I'm going to hit Option D to get everything there and back. Yeah, right there it looks pretty flat, doesn't it? But it's not as flat as I thought. So this is that. This was the curves, right? Let me just label that. Let me just put one more. And I'm just going to desaturate a little bit more. So I'll just put it in another node. I'll put it in another node because I kind of know if I go back and look at it later, desat 2, I'll know that I changed it to try to do some final tweaks. Let's come in. Oh yeah. Let's lower this a bit. Alright. Make sure I'm on the right thing here. It's funny, that didn't seem to change it that much, really, did it? If I pull it all the way to 0, that's really odd. I don't know why I'm not getting a change there. Let's go ahead and it's off and that's on. Alright, that is actually not doing much. I don't know why that is, honestly. Interesting. Well, let's just leave it in the tutorial. That is what it is, okay? Alright, you know what? I think it's time to put a fork in this thing. I know I'm long enough talking about this right now. So let's go back. Let's go ahead and turn on the grain and then let's export. So let's go to the color tab. This grain is this last node. Let's Command D, turn it on. And yeah, we'll live with it. Let's go to deliver. Let's go ahead and not deliver their stuff. Let's be right here. All right. Now, if I want to speed things up too, sometimes I will just render out that intermediate file. So let's go ahead and just call it tutorial final, which is never really a final. Let's switch it to QuickTime. This is 4K actually. Let's just put it in 4K and I'll see what it looks like. In my screen, 24 frames per second. We got 264. That's total fine codec since it's kind of the final output. As far as audio, I don't know. If you want to put in some audio, that can always make things just a little bit fun. All right, throw in some dramatic nonsense here. There we go. Boom, boom, something like that. Just kind of ease it in, ease it out. Oh heck, why don't we just throw in that? I don't need these things anymore. Let me just get rid of them, declutter it. Okay, there we go. All right, it looks like good. All the settings are good. Let's export the audio with that. We're good. Let's look at advanced scenes, force highest quality. Force sizing, highest quality. Shouldn't have any issues there. And let's add that to the queue. Let's render it out. All right, you can see the final result here. I hope the screen share picks it up very well. Try it reasonably well. Not perfect. Here's some things to change on the next iteration. Right here in the shadows, that needs to be deeper. I remember I lowered the opacity. I lowered it too much. I think it needs to be, it's just too bright too. And again, I need to figure out in Davinci how to look at the green channels, look channel by channel. That would help out a lot. But the big thing here too, as you can see, it's without any grade, it's horrific, right? Look at this. I mean, it's a joke. And then the shadows, I'll just turn on the shadow channel. Boom. Shadows help out a lot, right? I mean, a little bit, right? And I don't like the shadows. Honestly, I need to bring them out and just go back and change those, okay? But, yeah, but I hate to say that gets the point across because I can't stand it when people don't finish the tutorial. But this is long enough, so that's all I got. I think there's some good stuff in here for you to apply to make your own virtual set design. And of course, other things that extend upon this are the rotoscoping and things like that, so you can walk in front of this and everything like that. Let me not end on that. Let me end on a little bit of a better image there. All right. And actually, one last thing here, if you take a look at... Okay, here was the one I did before. So you can see this is a little bit different. I almost had the inverse problem here. This one I did before the tutorial. Shadows look a lot better, almost too dark. All right, and this guy's probably a little bit too dark overall. Whereas if you look at the other, it's a little bit, probably put more contrast. This is a little bit too light. All right, but yeah, things to play with to go from good to great. All right, that's it. Cheers.